Microsoft is back. We've said on this channel before that during the Xbox One generation, Microsoft was essentially vomiting all over themselves. And was this presentation perfect? Absolutely not. But it was certainly a really solid outing for Microsoft and gave us a really nice, clear picture of the Xbox Series X's trajectory going forward. And we will be talking about Halo Infinite next week with the whole group, so consider subscribing, and we would really appreciate your support. If you found this video helpful or enjoyable, please throw us a like and let us know down below what you thought about the Microsoft presentation. So I've talked in past videos about pieces of a puzzle that Microsoft has been basically making during the Xbox One generation. They had a shitty launch, for lack of a better term, but they've since been making a lot of very pro-consumer moves and just generally good moves towards making Xbox a very strong brand again. Those being Game Pass, backwards compatibility of the most powerful consoles, starting with the Xbox One X, and acquiring tons and tons of studios. But they needed to give us a vision. They needed to tie everything together with a cohesive event going into Series X, especially remembering the event going into the Xbox One. And largely they did. The vision is clear now. And the first thing I want to discuss is that Game Pass is the exclusive. Yes, there are games that come out on Xbox and Windows. A lot of people are giving Xbox flack for maybe not giving the toe-to-toe competition. They're not coming out with Ghost of Tsushima. They're not coming out with Last of Us Part 2 caliber of games, but they are coming out with some pretty damn good games, and Game Pass is really what the exclusive is. Right now, if you wanted to play Ghost of Tsushima, you have to go buy a PlayStation 4, then you have to go pay $60 for Ghost, and then you can play it. Currently, same for The Last of Us. You gotta pay $60, then you play it. When Halo Infinite comes out, if you have Game Pass, you're playing that day one. And yes, like I said, these might not be the most graphically demanding from the first-party studio. Not every single game that comes out of their first-party studios are going to be the graphical juggernauts, but there are still really good-looking games like Hellblade, like State of Decay, like Avowed, like Fable. So those really big projects still exist, but there's a smearing of smaller efforts from their first-party studios, and that's in an effort to basically give you a rich library to play indefinitely, which is kind of cool. And they've also been sprinkling things in with interactive dramas. Tell Me Why was one that kind of hit me. As there were a few that were in this presentation, but the first thing I want to say is that these are not for everyone. And to me, this is just a way to kind of feed the model, feed the subscription Netflix-esque model. I think this could come to bite them in the future, especially if they start integrating this episodic model in some of their other games. Like, imagine if Halo Infinite's campaign came out episodically, like you had to pay to play the first level and then a month later the second level. I don't know if that would work, but for now, I think there's a solid goal, and that Game Pass is the exclusive that you're buying into. You're not necessarily buying into singular titles. And speaking of singular titles, let's talk about some of those singular titles. Microsoft has been acquiring studios for years now, and they, I believe, have about 15 under their belt, and we're finally starting to see the fruits of those labors. It takes a long time to make a video game, and some of the video games we're seeing, Hellblade 2, Halo Infinite, Fable 4, State of Decay 3, and Avowed are, I mean, that's 5 really solid looking games. Of course, there are the smaller titles that are sprinkled in between, but for now, I think that's a decent lineup from a first-party standpoint to be excited for, especially when you take into account the massive backwards compatibility and backlog on Game Pass that you would have access to. Now, this was not perfect. Like I said, I do have concerns. And the first one, I'm just going to be honest, some of those game reveals are title screens. I'm looking at you, Fable. That's just a logo. That's like seeing Elder Scrolls 6 and Starfield, which I don't even know if people are excited for anymore, but that doesn't give a lot of faith. There was not a lot of gameplay besides Halo. Halo's basically the game with the gameplay. Not to say that Sony's perfect either. They were certainly guilty of showing not a whole lot of gameplay, but at least they were showing more than just a title screen for the most part. And the last thing, this is something I've talked about before. I've gotten some flack for it, actually. I firmly believe that Xbox One is holding the Series X back. I do think that it's cool that they are basically pitching first-party games are going to be forward compatible for the foreseeable future. You'll be able to buy Halo Infinite on your Xbox One, and then you'll be able to get a Series X version. Regardless, I do think that for the time, Sony exclusives are just going to blow Xbox exclusives out of the water because Sony's leaving the PS4 behind and they're going to be making games that can only be done on next generation. Well, Xbox is going to be making games that can be done on this current generation as well as next generation. That being said, the next generation version of the game is going to be fantastic. I mean, they already said Halo Infinite is going to be 4K 60 frames per second, which is kind of unheard of for a first-party game. I mean, think what you will of how Halo Infinite looks. We will be talking about that. But regardless, you're going to get extremely strong performing games. And Series X will always be a super strong performing third-party box as it was in the last generation. So, the future of Xbox. Let's take a moment to remember the Xbox One reveal. There were no used games. There were almost no games, period. It was marketed as an entertainment box, and it was an always online platform. That is pretty shitty and anti-consumer. Let us move forward to Xbox 2020. There's one platform, forwards and backwards compatibility to draw from a large catalog. It's the most powerful console, first-party games that are coming to Game Pass and PC day one, not to mention xCloud, which we haven't even talked about in this video in terms of Game Pass. And they're not trying to beat Sony in sheer game-to-game ambition. They're not going toe-to-toe graphically. They're doing something different. Instead, they're providing a thriving ecosystem to ensure that there really won't be a drought of things to play with your Xbox, provided you pony up the subscription service. And, at least for now, there's always that traditional buying model that you can take part in. You can just go buy Halo Infinite for $60 if that's what you want. I like physical games. I'll probably do that. Will this work? Who knows? But it sure as hell is a lot better than how the last generation started. That's all for me, guys. I will catch you next time.